My heart is pounding as I stand in the hallway, the muffled shouting echoing behind the closed door of my husband's home office. I don't even think before I burst into the room, seeing him standing over Chloe with that fierce anger in his eyes. Chloe is just stepping back, adjusting her bikini top, cheeks flushed, looking like she's been caught red-handed. Daniela stands behind her, eyes wild, her pearl necklace swinging as she gasps for breath. Before I can say anything, he lashes out. "Get out." His voice shatters the tension. "Both of you now." They stumble backwards, Chloe's phone flying from her hand. We watch as it hits the floor with a crack, face up. My name flickers on the glowing screen in the text preview, just as he steps forward and snatches it up. For a moment, I can't breathe. My husband reads out the messages, disbelief turning to anger with each word. Today's the day he won't be able to resist anymore. He scrolls quickly through the message chain as if to prove he's not imagining it. Each line he reads out makes the room spin. Detailed plans, instructions Daniela gave Chloe, what to wear, when to come by, how to act. I hear my own name, calls me fat and paranoid, the centerpiece of their mockery. I stand frozen in the doorway as silence crashes down. My husband's voice lowers, barely a whisper. "Did you plan this?" he demands. Daniela hisses back, her eyes darting away. "He deserves someone better," she sobs. Not someone like you." Her words come out jagged, like glass splitting. For a moment, I only feel relief that it's over. Then a sick realization. I'm pregnant. My mouth goes dry. Everything changes in an instant. But to understand how this nightmare unfolded, I have to start at the beginning. My husband and I had just bought our dream house, a cozy place with an indoor swimming pool glistening under soft lights. It felt like heaven on earth when we first moved in last summer, especially for someone like Daniela, his younger half-sister, a girl who had always been intensely, painfully needy for approval and attention. I remember the afternoon she first saw the pool. Her eyes got so big that I almost laughed. She begged us to let her come swim with her friend Chloe sometimes. We agreed, mostly to keep the peace. It meant nothing to my husband to have a few visits in our big pool room. After all, she rarely came when he was home. In his mind, this was just a sister helping out a lonely child. But over time, those visits became a kind of ritual. Daniela and Chloe came a handful of times, always when he had errands or office work somewhere else. They'd splash and giggle, leave a mess of towels and sunscreen behind, and then drift away from our lives. I never minded, and he didn't either, at least I didn't think so. Then everything changed one ordinary Tuesday morning. I was about 7 months pregnant when COVID started making headlines again, and my husband had begun working from home a few days a week. The first trimester had been a haze of exhaustion and morning sickness, and the hours of the day blurred together. I spent most mornings with a cup of tea on the couch, reading or listening to my baby's tiny kicks. My husband was usually upstairs in his office, on calls or typing away. We had our routines down. I felt safe. That morning, Daniela texted me out of the blue. She asked if she and Chloe could come over for a swim. Without thinking, I said no. I was exhausted. My belly was big, and I was just not comfortable having guests around during pregnancy. My husband was in the other room on a conference call, but Daniela must have cornered me while he was busy. "Come on, Mom," she typed back almost instantly. "It'll be quiet. 2 weeks of isolation. Just us and then we'll come over. Promise." I hesitated, blinking at her message. "Quarantine," she said. There hadn't been any new mandates that I'd heard of, but the pandemic already had me nervous. I glanced at my husband through the doorway. He was nodding along politely on his call. I texted back, "Okay, if you do 2 weeks in a row together, then you can come by." 2 weeks later, they were at our door at 10 a.m. My husband was indeed in his office upstairs, nose deep in a report, oblivious to what was about to happen. Daniela hugged me at the door, kissed my cheek, and then her eyes flickered to my belly. "You're huge," she said, pinching her fingers as if measuring the air between us, a look that felt half playful and half something else I couldn't place. I was on the verge of 8 months, but her tone stung. "Thanks," I forced out, feeling my cheeks flush. Chloe came next. She leaned in and patted my stomach with the most saccharine smile. She was wearing a bikini under a sheer cover-up, a really skimpy bright red one that made me flush on behalf of our unborn child. Daniela hopped over to my husband upstairs, whispering something urgent. He later said it was just a joke about a golf swing. "They'll be in the pool," Daniela called down, and after a quick kiss from her brother, they headed toward the back of the house. Once they were gone, I tried to settle back with my book on the couch. My husband returned from his meeting 15 minutes later, towels thrown over his shoulder. He glanced at us, asked if I needed anything. Daniela burst out giggling from behind him. "We're playing mermaids," she shouted. Chloe broke free from Daniela and came to the kitchen island, dripping wet. She had one of our towels wrapped hastily around her hips. As she reached for a glass of lemonade, she let her soaked hair flung forward over one shoulder, straight in my husband's line of sight. He chuckled at something she said, completely unaware of my racing heart. Chloe bounced on her toes for a better angle, as if aiming her body toward him on purpose. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. Something about the way Chloe was looking at my husband felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to shake it off. But at lunch, when I excused myself to warm up my soup, my husband followed. We exchanged a smile in the kitchen. "Your sister seems to really love this pool," I said quietly. He leaned against the counter, brushing a hand through his wet hair. "Yeah," he agreed absently. "She's always been a water baby. It's good for her to get out and relax." Just then Daniela stepped through the kitchen doorway. She was smirking oddly, and before I could imagine what she was thinking, she said to my husband, "Hey, Chloe's going to be so happy to see you." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a normal thing to say. My husband blinked. "Oh, that's nice. Why did she say that?" Chloe was not particularly close to him. We exchanged puzzled looks. 2 minutes later, Chloe herself slipped into the kitchen, a big towel wrapped around her shoulders. She locked eyes with my husband and gave him a bright grin. "Hey, Uncle," she said cheerfully, as if we were at a family reunion. She climbed up on a bar stool next to him and, under the guise of adjusting her towel, let it slide a little further down. My husband cleared his throat, looking at my face for a moment as if registering the absurdity of the scene, and then turned back to deal with it like an adult. Chloe began talking about her day at college, tossing her hair back every few words so that just the slightest edge of her bathing suit peeked out. When my husband tried to excuse himself to return to work, Chloe laughed like she just heard the world's funniest joke. Her giggle was high and sweet, and I felt my stomach flip. I reached out and took my husband's hand in the silence. "That felt weird, right?" I asked softly. "What was that all about?" He looked at me, eyebrows raising in confusion. "What felt weird, Carla?" "Chloe. Daniela. The way they acted. It's like, I don't know, like something's going on." I tried to sound nonchalant. My voice came out a little shaky. He smiled, trying to reassure me. "They're just being friendly. You're pregnant, so I guess you're feeling protective." I forced a laugh and dropped it. But as he turned back to his laptop, I felt a seed of doubt plant itself deep in my chest. Over the next few days, that seed grew thorns. Daniela and Chloe started coming over every day, and like before, Chloe never actually went into the water. Instead, she lay on a chaise by the pool, tanning like it was her personal sunbathing station. Daniela would swim or read a magazine nearby. Every time my husband emerged from his office, Chloe would appear almost magically, bikini glistening, ready to chat. She'd flutter her eyelashes at him, leaning close to hear him better, put an arm around his back as they walked to get towels, every movement just a hair too intimate. Whenever I was in the room, Chloe always seemed to angle away from me, making sure she had my husband's full attention. I watched, stomach aching, as my husband responded with polite smiles and gentle thumbs up, but he kept his distance physically. It was as if he didn't want to cross any obvious lines, yet he never cut the encounters short either. Daniela, meanwhile, had started dropping hints behind my back. At lunch one day, as Chloe knelt by the kitchen counter texting, Daniela leaned against the fridge next to me and quietly said, "You know, I read something interesting online. Some husbands start eyeing other women when their wives are pregnant. They feel a little trapped." I nearly choked on my sandwich. "Where is this going exactly?" I asked, snapping the lid on a tomato sauce jar too hard. Daniela gave me a look, brushing past it. "Oh, nothing," she said softly. "I was just remembering how hard pregnancy was. It can mess with a person's head." The next day, she ambushed me on the porch. I was putting away groceries. She was skipping up with a shopping bag she insisted I peek into. She pulled out a little jar of fancy under-eye cream. "Your eyes look tired," she cooed. "I swear by this stuff. Helps you look refreshed. You should try it before John sees you in public." Tears came unbidden to my eyes. The implication was so clear that I felt sick. Was my pregnant body so repulsive that the first thing she thought to give me was concealer? "Thanks," I mumbled, placing the cream on the counter as if I'd been burned. That night, after everyone had gone home, I finally confronted my husband. I found him alone in the kitchen, checking email on his laptop. My belly was resting on the counter, and I burrowed into him from behind. "John, do you think anything she said is true?" I asked quietly. He exhaled slowly. "What she said is absolute garbage." He turned in my arms and gently tugged my face to see his eyes. They were soft and tired. "Look at me, Carla. Did you trap me with the baby?" "Of course not. I love you." And Daniela was wrong. I felt stupid even asking, but years of neglecting my own insecurities had finally caught up to me. "But I'm really big, and she keeps pointing it out." "Baby," he cut me off, tucking my hair behind my ear. "You're gorgeous. And I'm lucky. Trust me." He gave me a gentle kiss on the forehead. Then he added, hesitating, "And you know, I've heard Daniela say other strange things too. It's all nonsense." I tried to smile but couldn't. "She told me once that a lot of men cheat when their wives are pregnant. Did you know that?" He's silent for a long beat, his expression glossy. "Who said that?" "Daniela, just now." He didn't answer, but he pulled me closer and murmured, "She's trying to make you anxious. She's upset. But she's wrong. Every time I come down here, you'll be here right next to me, okay?" I nodded against his chest, even though I wasn't entirely reassured. A few days later, at 10 a.m. sharp, another odd little scene played out. Daniela had texted me that morning saying Chloe had a hair appointment at noon but really wanted sun. I was still bleary-eyed in my pajama shorts, unfinished toast in hand, when they arrived. Daniela breezed in and gasped at me. "You look exhausted," she exclaimed. "Have you tried using an under-eye cream? It works wonders. I could get you some. Super affordable." I forced a smile. Chloe, however, was already lounging in the pool area wearing an even smaller swimsuit than before, one I'm pretty sure was meant for a much slimmer teenager. At 10:30, my husband emerged for coffee. Chloe practically sprinted from the poolside to intercept him, water droplets glistening on her skin. She positioned herself between him and the coffee maker on purpose, leaning in to speak in his ear while reaching on tiptoe for mugs on the top shelf. Her back grazed his chest for just a second. He stiffened, then calmly stepped away. "Can I help you?" he asked politely, noticing the tension. Chloe bit her lip and batted her eyelashes. "Actually, my Wi-Fi is acting up. Could you help me with the password again?" He nodded and pulled his phone out. "Sure, Chloe. But remember, I have a meeting in 5 minutes." She leaned her hip against the counter, her knee brushing his leg. "It'll just take a sec," she pouted. She slipped her hand up to his forearm and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "You're so good with this stuff." Her voice dropped to a whisper as she buried herself in his side. My husband held his face cool. Okay. Let me check the router settings." He gently pried her hand away after a moment. Then on cue, Daniela materialized by his side, acting as if she needed to step out onto the patio. I slipped out of the kitchen, heart hammering. I took up my fruit bowl back in the living room and resumed prepping a snack, but my mind was racing. That afternoon, Daniela sat next to me at the table and started sharing another story about someone else's marriage disaster. "It was awful," she whispered. "The husband said being married was like having a bunch of weight strapped to him. He left his wife right after their baby was born." I chopped my apple slices faster and glared down at them. "Why are you telling me this now?" She shrugged, looking innocent. "I read an article. It's just common knowledge, you know. I just want you to be prepared." She waited for a reaction. Finally, I lost it. I launched into her, voice shaking. "I don't appreciate this, Daniela. Not at all. Why do you keep telling me things like this? Like I'm about to lose my husband. What is that about?" Her face froze, then she suddenly looked hurt. "I'm just trying to help. Pregnancy is hard. By making me paranoid?" I snapped. She flinched. "Stop being crazy, Carla," she shot back. "I'm not the one tearing this marriage apart." My husband, who had been quietly cleaning the counter, spun around. "Okay, that's enough." He stepped between us, hands up. "No more? Nobody is tearing anything apart." She forced a smile and collected her things. She and Chloe said their goodbyes and went out to the pool, slamming the door quietly behind them. I stood at the doorway, heart racing. He came back inside. "I'll handle this," he said. But his voice lacked its usual warmth. He looked at me, so hurt and angry. I suddenly thought of 100 things I'd forgotten to say. Instead, I just stood there in silence. That evening, after dinner, I found myself scrolling through photos on my phone. In every picture Daniela was in lately, she was fixated on my husband, hanging on his arm, following him around. I felt sick. I started putting things into words. I think Daniela might have been planning this for a long time," I whispered in the kitchen as he shut down his laptop. He set his chin hard. "All right," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time we talk to someone officially." I nodded numbly. We were both too scared to blink. That night, I woke up with a jolt to a pain in my belly. It felt like wave after wave of pressure that wouldn't go away. My husband bolted upright too, his eyes wide in the dark. "Carla," he murmured. "I think a contractions," I managed. I felt lightheaded. My heart was thudding so hard I was sure he could hear it. He shot out of bed and had me sitting on the floor by the bed, back against the wall, legs splayed in front of me. Breathe, he urged. The hospital bag, which I'd already packed prematurely, was in his hands without him thinking. 2 hours later, we were in a hospital room. I lay on a narrow bed under bright fluorescent lights while nurses and a doctor snapped around us. My contractions were coming every few minutes, each one stretching out endlessly. "I'm sorry," I cried softly to my husband. "I think I'm giving birth." He squeezed my hand. "It's okay, baby. You're safe." The doctor was calm and kind. She put me on a monitor and explained it was likely Braxton Hicks contractions triggered by stress, not real labor. Both our hearts felt like they'd stop when she said, very gently, "I'm going to keep her in here to monitor for a while. We'll make sure everything's okay, but it's very likely we'll send you home on bed rest." By dawn, the contractions slowed and my anxiety eased a little. We were sent home on a strict order of bed rest and easy living. Our daughter was fine. Back in our quiet house, my husband put on his earnest face. He took me into his arms in the empty living room. I was so blind, he whispered. He apologized over and over, kissing my forehead. I should have listened to you. I kept crying into him. I'm scared, I admitted. I'm so scared. He held me tightly. We'll be okay, he promised. The next day, he phoned his father. It was the first time in months they'd spoken. I could barely hear his end of the conversation, but I caught the end. Yes, we have to block her from calling. No, I don't want drama at home. I'll give you every penny for a lawyer. Hearing his father offer help made my eyes go hot again. My husband collapsed against the kitchen counter, exhausted. He said he'll pay for a lawyer, he said quietly. And he's not surprised. He said Daniela's always been manipulative. Did you know she lied to him as a child? My chest tightened with realization. Of course our families had warned us about her long ago. We had just refused to believe it. That evening, in my labor-soiled hospital gown, we both sat on the floor leaning against our bed. My husband pulled a scrap of paper from his pocket, his unsent letter to Daniela. He'd written down everything. How he defended her to his parents, how he'd given up his own comfort for her sake, and how her cruelty had almost destroyed his marriage and frightened our baby. In the end of the letter he wrote, I forgive you, but I will never forget or let you back into our lives. He read lines quietly to me, tears glistening. I held him when he paused, shaking. I forgive her, he said, but not for going near us. We spent 3 days at his father's old house in the next town, holed up as quietly as possible. It was awkward at first, the kind of awkward you get when a little boy comes home with a broken toy and the parent is furious, but also shaken to find out their child was hurt all along. His father was quiet and stiff, but he brought us dinner every night and told me never to apologize for protecting my baby. On the second night there, he showed us something I'd never have imagined seeing. He handed us a thick notebook bound in black leather. It looked like an attack journal. Inside were hundreds of photos Daniela had taken, of our house, of our backyard, of phone screenshots of our messages, and of my husband, sometimes even of our bedroom door, dated and annotated. She had marked down our routines. John leaves home at 7:45 a.m., Carla goes grocery shopping at 2 p.m., appointment dates. She had planned, just like the messages said. My husband stared at the pages, his lips pressed into a thin line. She planned this from months before I even met you, he whispered. We were just targets waiting. I silently wept. The violation was enormous. That night, after we returned home, I started having contractions again. It was just stress, my doctor assured us, but she insisted I do nothing but lie down. My husband spent nights with me by my pillow, hand on my belly, watching each rise and fall of it in worry. 2 weeks later, on a snowy Sunday morning, I went into real labor 2 weeks early. Our daughter was so small, only 5.5 pounds, and for a few terrifying hours the doctors weren't sure we'd all make it. But we did. And when the nurse placed her on my chest, trembling and tiny but alive, I felt a fierceness rise inside me that I never knew I had. My husband cried when he held her for the first time. He whispered promises over and over. She would be safe, protected. She would never be a pawn in someone else's game. We spent 5 days in the hospital, cooing at our baby and adjusting to this new life. In that time, Daniela's lawyer was busy too. He pushed for a lighter sentence, saying she was mentally ill and needed help, not prison. The prosecutor's offer was still weak. 2 years probation, if she'd obey the rules, or 5 years in jail if she didn't. My husband told me he didn't care about revenge anymore. He just wanted us safe and done with it. His eyes were weary as he spoke. On the last night before we could go home, my husband's father visited again. He came bearing a stuffed elephant for the baby, small, simple, and hesitant. My husband's father was never a warm man, but that night he awkwardly handed us the toy and smiled. I'm proud of you, he said to my husband in a low voice, eyes on that new grandchild. That phrase, proud of you, seemed to settle something heavy between them. We decided to take a chance. We couldn't stay. Not with what had happened. So before Christmas, my husband applied for a transfer with his company to their West Coast office. His father helped us sell the house quickly, taking a small loss just to help us escape. We told only a few friends where we were going, promising to keep it secret. We packed everything and drove across the country with our baby girl in the car seat. 5 days of motels and diner breakfasts. Every mile we drove put more space between us and the chaos. With each state line we crossed, my anxiety eased a little. By the time we reached the Pacific Ocean, something had finally changed inside both of us. My husband smiled more than I'd seen in months. When our daughter felt the sand on her toes for the first time, she giggled with wonder at the gulls. We felt ourselves healing in our own messy way. We found a tiny 2-bedroom apartment overlooking a quiet courtyard. It was nothing like our dream house, with no pool at all, but it was ours untainted. Our daughter didn't care about pools. She just liked watching the pigeons on the balcony. My husband set up his work desk in the bedroom corner. I started arranging the nursery gently. At night I caught him standing at the window, looking out at the palm trees, deep in thought. But little by little, the nightmares and fear lifted. We installed a smart security camera at the door, even though it felt ridiculous to be on high alert so far from our old home. He'd still wake up at 2 a.m. sometimes to double-check the locks on every window and door. Over the next months, we found a new routine. I joined a mother's group and met other new moms. One of them, Kathy, had a baby born prematurely too. We bonded over crib stories and caffeine-deficient mornings. She became a lifeline, someone who didn't know our past, only celebrated our present. My husband buried himself in work. His new team was launching a big project, and his focus helped drown out any lingering fear. He played on a weekend basketball league, joking with coworkers. Once he actually laughed at a joke that wasn't mine and said, "I needed that." We still got the occasional reminder that our past hadn't fully disappeared. One night his phone rang at 2 a.m. Unknown number, local code. My husband saw Mom flash on the screen. He'd forgotten to block her on his work phone. We let it go to voicemail. Her slurred message unleashed that old anger at me again. "You've ruined her life and stolen my granddaughter," she sobbed. Something about hiring a PI to find us. My husband deleted it immediately. We sighed and locked the voicemail, but sleep would not come that night. So when a couple of weeks later I found a small package on our doorstep, no return address, I nearly dropped it. The kids at the apartment above ours were young and curious. Someone must have gotten confused, I hoped. My husband came out in slippers. Together we opened it. Inside was a brand new baby dress, white, soft, with an embroidered elephant, and a note scrawled in shaky handwriting, for my niece Dee. My blood ran ice cold. "They know what we named her," I whispered, recognizing the sloppy script. My husband's face turned ashen. This has to be from them," he said, voice barely steady. They had somehow gotten her name right, even after we moved. We brought it into the living room like it was evidence. Our building's manager and a security guard examined it carefully. The note read like some sick taunt. My husband said it would complicate our restraining order, but he feared even more for us. That night, he wiped away his anger and hugged me. "We can't live like this," he said quietly. So we left. Again. My parents helped us sell our remaining furniture, promised us they would care for our things if needed. We donated the crib and changing table. They were reminders of a house we could never be happy in again. Within days, our car was packed and we drove another 100 miles to yet another apartment in a gated complex not far from where we were. This one had a doorman, cameras in the parking lot, people who we hoped wouldn't know our names or our story. We even gave the office a false forwarding address to keep our location secret. That night I held our tiny girl in the nursery of this new place and finally felt something like peace. The moon was full, casting silver light across the quiet room. My husband stood behind me, hands on my shoulders, and we just watched our daughter breathe. "We made it," he whispered. "We made it through the worst." And I wanted to believe him. For the first time in a long time, I thought we might actually be okay. 2 days later, as I listened to the gentle rhythm of my daughter's sleep, I let myself dream of what normal life might look like. The ocean would only be minutes away on foot, the sun shining overhead instead of hovering as a threat. Outside, a soft breeze rustled the curtains, carrying the faint promise of morning. In our little apartment, in our little family that we had chosen, it was silent but for the sound of hope. One sunrise at a time, one small victory at a time, we were learning to live again. And for the first time, I felt certain we would be okay.